Good afternoon, or good morning, everyone. Thank you, Brandon, for that introduction. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, while my panelists here get comfortable, situated, I'll just level set a little bit on today's panel and discussion. The need to streamline operations in the air cargo industry was very much exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of us witnessed a huge acceleration of ecosystem stakeholders looking to digitize or digitalize, as it may be, at least some aspect of their operations, be it to circumvent congested ports, manage labor shortages, or deal with the capacity constraints that we all saw. Now, notwithstanding the magnitude of any of these efforts, there is a question to be answered, and that is about how far these efforts have pushed the air cargo industry. And has this industry actually reached the point of a tipping point of digitalization? And how do you know? My name is Dan Markovic, and I lead the National Aviation Leader for Deloitte, and I'm also the air cargo leader based out of Toronto, Canada. And I have the privilege of introducing three highly experienced and decorated panelists who may help us answer that question while sharing how air cargo has changed since the pandemic and what the future may hold, as seen through their eyes and through their lenses. So let me first introduce to my left Mr. Turhan Ozen, who's Chief Cargo Officer at Turkish Cargo. Turhan is at the helm of delivering air cargo services to over 340 destinations worldwide, and recently opened what is called a mega hub at Istanbul Airport, a state-of-the-art facility incorporating smart technology, augmented reality, automated storage, and unmanned ground vehicles, designed for a staggering 340,000 cubic meters, or square meters, pardon me, of space, and an annual capacity, if I understand, over 400 million tons of cargo. With credentials like that, it's no wonder that Turkish was named fastest growing international cargo airline of the year last year. So congratulations on that, and thank you for being part of this panel.
Thank you. Thank you, Dejan.
Our next panelist to his right is Henrik Leysens, Vice President, Global Operations Cargo at Swissport International. Henrik has been with Swissport for over 10 years now in various progressive positions. He's responsible for Swissport's global cargo team, service products, the systems, standards, and processes, and initiatives, of course. Henrik's skills were sharpened in Brussels and in Zurich, and which I think is going to serve him well as he's in the process of relocating to Chicago. And you will be running Swissport's business in the U.S. West region, I understand. Congratulations. Thank you for joining us as well. And last but certainly not least, to my immediate left is our third panelist, Tristan Koch, Chief Commercial Officer at Avery Aviation Software, a web-based provider of aviation solutions. Tristan is an experienced airline leader with over 20 years in cargo and in the cargo business across various geographical landscapes with American as well as IAG Group in the past. In the last 3 years, Tristan, you've focused a lot on helping the industry adopt and implement new technologies. And you bring that role with you at Avery as one of the leading and most innovative IT companies out there. Now, as incredible as that is, Tristan, in his spare time, organizes the UK's largest charity beer festival. And to date, this is fantastic, to date has raised just almost 500,000 GBP to date. That's fantastic. Congratulations. Now, as incredible as that is, an air cargo executive having spare time is something else. So you had me at charity. You had me at charity, Tristan, all kidding aside. So let's hop to it, gentlemen. Given that we have broad representation here, airlines, cargo services, and we have solutions providers, wanted to get your perspective and begin by level setting on what each of you see has accelerated in the cargo industry over the course of the pandemic, through each of your respective lenses. So maybe, Turhan, if we can start with you.
Okay, thank you, Dejan. First of all, it's now a story that we all know very well, the first few months of 2020. So we should start with COVID, because I believe COVID showed that this industry is agile enough to survive and serve better and create value for the end customers, the owners of the cargo. And so this will be a good example also to show the same agility into the digitalization journey. We had first insights and news from China about this strange virus early January from Wuhan, but just started to see the third and fourth week of January 2020 that our traditional pre-Chinese New Year high volume from Hong Kong and mainland China was not picking up there. There was something strange. Yeah, but until that moment, virus was just a small news, most probably for many of us. So, likewise in every part of the world, by mid-February and end of February, in 3 weeks' time, we have lost all of our belly capacity, all the passenger aircrafts were totally grounded in 3 weeks' time, which means for Turkish Airlines as a combined airline, one of the biggest network provider both in passenger and cargo, 60%, 55 to 60% our total cargo capacity. Only the freighters are on the air. They are trying to carry all the urgent cargo. First it was the test kits and some medicals to protect against virus. Later the masks and other protective equipment, PPEs. And I believe all the industry, also Turkish Airlines being one of them, moved very agile to adopt and create capacity in such a difficult turmoil. What was that? It's mainly the passenger freighters, the freighters. So we have seen for Turkish, it was 20th of March that we had our first PAX freighter, passenger freighter, or freighter. And until now, it is more than 6,000 flights now in 2 years' time, roughly a bit more than 2 years' time. I believe this shows how the industry can react agilely. This is obviously was a very big job, starting from flight safety of the civil aviation authorities. You need to take a lot of precautions, trainings, handling was big challenge certainly, but should adopt for that. And all the industry finally made this available. And as the fastest and most safe and secure transportation mode, in the last 2 years, our industry proved itself as a strong industry to adopt itself to the changes. But when it comes to the level of digitalization, for the moment, it is not so. So we have to, I believe, show the same and take the similar journey of speed, flexibility, and fast adaptation to make sure that we are surviving for the next 10 plus years.
Great, thank you. Henrik, what do you see as accelerated?
It's actually an excellent example that Turhan brings here. The entire implementation of the freighters, it indeed shows what we were able to do as an industry, which in a matter of a few weeks, everybody really pulled together. Something looking at digitization that we've seen across our network has actually been the implementation of cargo community systems in airports across the globe. I think this was stimulated by a variety of topics. One is airport authorities having gained a lot more attention for the cargo business as a whole, therefore focusing on efficiency gains on that side of the airport, or what many of those consider the ugly side of the airport. I consider it the beautiful part of the airport, obviously. But there's been quite a big drive in airports across the globe when it comes to implementing community systems. We've seen that really picking up. We've seen a lot of stakeholder engagement there. I think there's still quite a few barriers for us to cross though as an industry, but that for sure has been a major element. For me, number two, if you look at the effect COVID had on the way all of us work, we went from meeting face-to-face at events like this or meeting with customers and suppliers face-to-face to virtual and then afterwards hybrid in a matter of a few weeks. Which was quite a way of changing the way we work together. I think this has as well led to the way we interact with customers in a much more digital way. I'm sure it's I'm sure that's one of the reasons that we see a lot of those press releases recently on digital sales channels going live. A lot of airlines are signing up with some of those sales channels. A lot of handling agents are developing customer-facing portals, etc., just like we have done, which is just a different way of interacting with customers altogether. COVID for sure has stimulated a much more focus on convenience as well, and I'm sure that that has been one of the major drives we've seen.
Excellent. Tristan, you complete the trifecta. You're, airline services now, the solutions provider. Do you see it the same way?
Well, I think the choice of acceleration is interesting because I don't think we could have gone any slower. So it was always going to be an acceleration of where we were. It's a bit of a shame that it took something like the COVID pandemic to bring this about. But I would say what was accelerated, I think it's put into three buckets, is sort of need, then belief, and then curiosity. So the need was immediate. The industry was transformed in the matter of a week or two. And you're right, we adopted very quickly, and people adopted a lot of new ways of working, particularly the IT-based technologies. But they already existed. One of the questions is, well, why weren't we doing that last year, the year before? But I think kudos to the industry for adopting those new ways of working. And then came the belief, actually, I don't go and need to see that client every week to keep my business. Actually, they're quite pleased to interact online with me to fulfill their bookings this way or whatever. So I think there's now a belief in the industry that's dispelled some of those fears around technology brings loss of jobs, you lose control. I think some of those fears have now been dispelled a little bit by the success, if you like, of the digitalization that we have seen come through. I still think it's slightly superficial. I think sure, the pricing inventory part of the business has probably progressed quicker than some other parts. I still think there's a long way to go on the connectivity of some of these things. But I think the other thing it's done is it's raised curiosity. Our industry is now, it's in the public limelight in a way that it never was. Everyone wants to know what logistics, supply chain, air cargo is all about. And that brings other people to the table. And disruptors look for inefficiencies. They sniff these opportunities out. And it's interesting, when you attend conferences like this now, and we've been to, for the last sort of 12 months, traveling around various industry conferences, it used to be airlines, forwarders, ground handlers, etc. I now see IT providers as 30% of the people attending these events. And that curiosity is coming to disrupt our business in a good way. And I'm now part of that change. I've come from the airline side, and I see the future, as from the technology side. And I think it's a great thing. And the acceleration is well needed. It's just a shame it took COVID to bring it about.
Indeed, and each of you have started alluding to some of the challenges, and we're going to go there in a minute. But I want to talk a little bit about this tipping point that we opened with. If we mean, and what we mean by it. So if we look at the tipping point as a point of no return, in the positive sense, then let's try to understand how the three of you identify that tipping point. Toren, you said, I have you quoted from a periodical here, only those cargo airlines will be successful that react fast to changing circumstances and adapt to new situations with the utmost flexibility. I feel like that's a fair statement, especially given what's happening with your new mega hub. Is that what it takes to get to the tipping point or cross into the tipping point?
No, to be honest, I believe we are still far behind the tipping point as the company, ours, Turkish Airlines and Turkish Cargo, but also as the industry. Why? First of all, we shall admit that we are a very fragmented industry. The value chain from the beginning of the shipper sending the cargo, preparing the cargo, until the consignee receives at the other corner of the world, is very fragmented. And the coordination, alignment, synchronization, not only in operational level, also in strategic level, is very challenging for such an industry. The other aspect is we have different dynamics from demand and supply parts. From supply part, we are a part of the aviation industry, we can call it. And we all know that the real big business in this aviation industry is the passenger travel worldwide. So all the capacity decisions, routing decisions, most of the industry standards are first and predominantly aligned for passenger travel. And then there is cargo. Most of them are in the belly. So it's always good to fulfill main deck, also the lower deck. It's certainly a significant contribution margin provider. So it's very profitable to do that both, especially for combined airlines like Turkish and several others. But this makes the supply part of the industry, from a definition perspective, already a challenge. From a demand perspective, from the customer perspective, we are a part of total global supply chain. We are just a transportation mode, which is very much need to align or impact each other with other transportation modes or any other factors that impact to the movement of goods and cargoes worldwide, from warehousing to the inventory sales ratios, to the ocean sea freight rates, to the Trans-Siberian Railway connection, whether it stops or it goes. So basically from demand side, from the customer side, that's also a different story for the same industry. So air cargo is probably one of the most challenging industries when it comes to digitalization from all these factors. But certainly I am not pessimistic. I believe if we can continue and even accelerate further the progress and speed up that we had urged to do during the COVID time related to digital initiatives, in the next 3 to 5 years, hopefully not more, we can say that as industry, we are on tipping point, so that we are no more so much of a risk for such disruptive out of industry forces, or we are not always challenged by our customers or any other stakeholders about the value creation of the industry.
5 years, I'm writing it down here, just to keep track. Henrik, same question to you. How do you measure the digitization tipping point? And maybe I'll add, if it's relevant, and if it's applicable rather, is there a measure of a critical mass that you need?
I mean, from my point of view, I actually look at that topic with two different aspects. One is the availability of the technology as such. It's exactly what Tristan said before, right? The technology is there already. There are fantastic platforms out there. There's plenty of IT suppliers in the room that have built platforms with open architecture that can connect in a variety of ways to any other third-party application. There's platforms out there that provide 100% visibility of all your processes. There's systems, tools, there's IoT. All of that technology actually exists. So looking at the digitization tipping point, I think technology-wise and capabilities-wise, our industry is there. We've crossed that tipping point already. And that to me links into the second aspect then. Have we as an industry truly embraced that technology? Have we implemented that technology? And that's actually where I see a much bigger challenge today. The technology is out there. We just need to make sure that we use it and we implement it. And for me, I would say our industry, and as well criticizing my own organization there, we tend to be quite risk averse. We don't take a lot of risks very fast. And I really think that that is an element for us to deep dive into, further discover, and a barrier for us to remove.
So one of my last questions is going to be around failure in digitization. A little bit honest, and we want to get to that point. So thank you for that. Tristan, let me adjust that question slightly. What needs to be true or consistent in your business to feel that you've reached a tipping point?
Well, I'd firstly say I agree with both of what you said, and I think the technology part of it exists, and if it doesn't, there's many people like ourselves able, willing and ready to design it if it doesn't exist already. In terms of tipping points and what have you, I think we're on an inevitable path to this. The question is when that critical mass, as you said, is reached. And for me, I'm going to try and put it in relatively simple terms, but a lot of the focus that we've seen since COVID is really about what I would call the automation of manual processes. It's about digitalization of things that have been inherently done in a manual way. I think where there's a big leap still to be made is in terms of, one, pushing that through all of the parts of the supply chain, and then more importantly, empowering people or explaining to people from a change management perspective why it's important to share that information for the benefit of everybody. There's still a lot of, perhaps fear is too strong a word, but data's become, this new phrase, data is the new gold. Well then, if you've got gold, you don't want to give it away. But actually, I think the industry needs to take a different approach to this, and I'm pleased to say we were invited by IATA to speak to one of their bodies yesterday, and they're looking to find ways in which data sharing can become more effective. I won't say cheaper, but more freely shared, so that we can reach that critical mass point quicker. So for me, when we've reached that tipping point is when we see true efficiencies delivered by the new technologies that we have, rather than sort of simply replacing manual processes that we sort of are pushing through today.
Thank you for that. So let's go to the context of future. So we talked about the tipping point. Let's talk about the process and looking toward the future. How the pandemic has affected these challenges that we face in the industry. Because major digital adoption obviously doesn't come without its challenges, especially in a fragmented industry. Turan, do you see risk in the market? Global inflationary pressures, supply and demand. Is market normalization a risk to digitization in terms of coming back or regression as a challenge that you see?
There are certainly challenges in digital speed and adaptation, and I agree with the points underlining by Tristan a lot. But the market conditions should be, and in my opinion, are secondary to these challenges, because we will have good times, we will have bad times, as we did every 5 to 10 years. It's very volatile industry. The challenges are mostly from within the industry, from the fragmentation of the parts, all the stakeholders of the value chain, from within the organizations, within the companies. For example, for us, it's certainly a change management. If you want to have a speed integration of data, if you want to initiate digital initiations to make sure that they are delivered on time and effectively and efficiently, then you should really drive and lead change management. That's certainly related to culture, awareness, perception, the management's involvement. And in order to make these successful, incremental approach or step-by-step approach, I believe, is very important. Should be continuous, but should be gradually implemented. If you really come up with a final solution to a process that are being managed in a certain way for the last 30 to 40 years, then you end up with failing. Therefore, the approach of minimum viable product that you can create and then take a stepwise approach to really make it better and better into the perfection runs within such big organization like airlines, especially the combined airlines, where you also compete for the resources of your IT teams with your bigger brothers in passenger travel part. Therefore, it's a challenge, certainly, but the challenge is mostly from within rather than from outside factors, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Henrik, over to you.
I think it's an incredibly interesting question. I mean, we're sitting in front of a room of golden children, right? This was the industry, or the air cargo business was the golden child in our industry in the last 2 years. A lot of companies in this room have really thrived, and really we had a massive momentum behind us. Now, looking at some of the messages before of Seabury and IATA, which was to a certain extent a bit depressing, right? There's recession looming around the corner. I think the question to ask ourselves is, have we really grabbed the momentum of the last 2 years to drive change and consistent change through? The budgets were there, the efforts were there, the people were there, the commitment was there. The question is, have we used that to the full extent to really drive change through? And will we be able to continue that momentum, seeing what we see happening now, and perhaps a bit of a more gloomy outlook for the coming 12 to 24 months? Additionally, I think you mentioned earlier, like the critical mass. It's a point I'll happily take as well. I actually don't believe you always need critical mass. If two organizations are able to partner up to achieve certain change, to change their processes, to digitize processes, to run projects, then why would we wait? That's a perfect way of doing things. And you're able to as well already drive change on an industry level that way with some of those initiatives. And we have fantastic examples from around our network where we've partnered up with our suppliers or with customers to change processes in one or the other location. And it actually works fantastically. And the thing is that if you do that with a global organization, you're able to copy paste that to a numerous amount of locations afterwards.
I love it. You're solutioning already. Fantastic. Tristan, we've talked in the past where, again, challenges and there's gizmos or tools to bridge the gap between some of these. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it's a bit boring to agree with everyone on the panel, but I think change management is actually one of perhaps the biggest challenge we face. And I'll give you an example of how we're trying to bridge that gap between the existing processes and the new way. Despite all the progress we've made, the majority of transactions in the air cargo world are still either done by email or telephone. The platforms are certainly rising, and that take-up will only increase. But the reality is, a lot of manpower is spent processing, these transactions. So we build what we call hybrid technology to try and move people from that manual process onto the automated side. And it's a very simple proposition. We have a product called eMagic. It reads inbound emails from freight forwarders. It interprets them for airlines, can put a rate to it. You can change it if you want, and sends a digital response back to the forwarder who can just click and make a booking. So that's a very simple example of how we're trying to move the industry, through showing people that technology doesn't need to be a fear or a hindrance. I think there's another problem here. Dave Shepherd, who spoke really well this morning, and I used to work for Dave, and great respect for him. And he's just come back from Barcelona. He said kids in jeans and trainers are now leading the industry. And he's right, but do they want to go into our industry and learn for 6 months how to fill in an airway bill? They don't. They run their lives off an iPhone. I mean, I've got 2 teenage daughters. That's all they use to run their life. And to bring them into our industry and say to them, here's a load of paper or here's a load of process you need to get to grips with, I'm sure it's not an inviting proposition for them. So we need to make these changes to make ourselves more attractive to people coming into the industry. But I realise as well, there is some step changes. We can't just go, it's not like a big bang and everything goes online. We need to make these steps to create that sort of progress.
So staying along the lines of solution, because we're coming up with answers here. And I was originally going to ask this question maybe in the negative context, why do we fail? But I think I'm going to kind of reverse it. How do we not fail? Right? How do we not fail going forward at digitization initiatives? So, do we wait too long? Do we underestimate the impact of, to your point, the size of the ecosystem and the stakeholders, how many stakeholders are involved? And do we look at ROI a different way now? So, Turhan.
Yeah, let me give some concrete examples of this step-by-step MVP approach, minimum viable product approach. Maybe this will show how shall we proceed and not fail from the other side. We were working intensely, but most probably not fast enough, about our WhatsApp chatbot just before the pandemic arose. But during the pandemic, with the start of the pandemic, as everywhere in the world, our teams, except the direct operations teams, had to work home. So everyone is in the home office. So the communication internally and also with the customer is much of a challenge. The teams are now all dispersed all around the city and later on all around the country and sometimes the world. And from early hours of the day until midnight, all the teams trying to align as they will do it very easily during a 5-10 minutes coffee break maybe in the office in order to speed up and organize and coordinate their daily work. We asked our teams to speed up with our chatbot it was the March, April 2020 to make sure that we have easy communication and facility to our customers to inquiry about the tariffs, prices, rates, and the status of their cargo, their vehicle. But in the beginning, the definition of the chatbot project was a full range functionality. Why and how? Why? Because it was very similar approach with the passenger chatbots. But in cargo, we need some things much more simpler to begin with. So it's not B2C industry. I mean, all the operators at the other side of the B, our forwarders, our customers, they are already knowledgeable about following up. So basically, we asked our IT units to define the chatbot in a much simpler way as a minimum viable product and launch it as early as May 2020, just in the second, third month of the pandemic. It helped us a lot. Obviously now, after 2 years, it's not the same chatbot anymore. It is certainly getting new function in every version release. It's becoming more and more of a full range of follow-up and track and trace between the end of the chains. But we didn't have the luxury to wait for these during the COVID times. Basically, this shows how step-by-step approach can be successful into the digitalization. A similar example in robotic process automations as well, in RPAs. We just started all of our RPAs in a hurry in order to make sure that the efficiency we lost from working from home is not resulted into our process results. And RPAs were very quick to really increase the efficiency in very time-consuming processes. And our teams, our blue collars, engineers, specialists, experts, were just concentrated on the analysis or management of exceptions and contingencies or direct customer communication. This also, again, started as a one step, first 2, 3 RPAs, now ended up with several others with more basic processes to manage and handle. So I totally agree that this should be a step-by-step approach.
Thank you.
In order not to fail.
Henrik, your thoughts?
Yeah, from my point of view, it comes down to 2 things. One is, which is key, is stakeholder engagement. To me, that's really key because for us as a service provider, without engaging with our stakeholders, we're not able to design processes nor tools that work for our customers or work for our suppliers. So that's where we always start. So Swissport has a digital roadmap, and it's an exercise that we regularly update internally, but it's something that we jointly do with our customers. So we will always make sure that we seek input to make sure we focus on the right elements, the right processes, and the right tools. Linking to that, something that we've launched earlier this year is a weekly NPS. So that goes out to all our customers in every station, through every layer of their organization every week. So we really feel the pulse of our customers continuously. We immediately sense where there is an issue, whether it's communication, whether it is an operational hiccup that we might have had, whether it's capacity, whatever it is, we immediately sense throughout our operation what the perception of our customer on our operation is. And hence we're able to as well steer that digital roadmap in the right direction incredibly fast when we indeed need to go over to solutionizing. So stakeholder engagement is for sure number 1. For me, number 2, and them being one of our stakeholders, but important to call out, is employee engagement as well. Because how do you ever drive change through your organization if you don't involve your employees and your staff up front? It's something we've done as well in the last 1.5 years. We've been deploying a new mobile app across our operations across the globe, where we're really changing the way that we work for thousands of our employees. Now followed by a specific employee app where people can consult rosters, do trainings and all of that. So that's running as well. But obviously part of the steering committee, part of the involvement are our staff, because we're building this for them. They are the ones that work with this on a day-to-day and is incredibly important. And to your point, Tristan, like do people still want to join our industry? I was in one of our classes, like an introduction class that we did a few weeks ago. And then we're explaining about airway bills and dangerous goods declarations and all of that, and you just see people thinking, what is all of this about? This is so incredibly complex. And those are really some of the elements that we need to work on to make sure that our people are able to perform their task as easy as possible and as smooth as possible.
Agreed. An excellent segue into the final question, which is for you, Tristan. We have a minute and a half left. You're a solutions provider. You're an enabler in many cases. How do you ensure that people do not fail?
Well, I'd agree about the people side for a start, but we haven't really touched upon money, which often is the thorny issue. But and a lot of people in this room have been very successful over the last 2.5 years during COVID. A lot of organisations have made record profits. Now, at the beginning of that COVID process, a lot of the industry stakeholders probably cut their digital transformation budgets in half, or if not totally at all. I'd be really curious to know at what level they've set them for next year with a sort of less rosy economic picture in front of us. What I would say is, don't be afraid. Technology doesn't have to be expensive. I know you need to show an ROI on what you're doing. I think you need to explore, be curious. Another thing Dave Shepherd said this morning, be curious about what the industry can offer. We have tools and ways of helping you through that transition. It doesn't have to be the big bang approach that we talked about. And we have a little mantra in our business. There are 3 pillars that we have to bring increased efficiencies, more process control, and the very best customer experience. And we always think if we can deliver those 3 things, the ROI just comes. But as I say, if we're going to keep this acceleration, we don't want to sit here next year and go, why did we decelerate in 2023? And let's not let that not be a lack of investment or curiosity about what we're doing. So I would just say, talk, collaborate, and let's change people's minds about what we do.
Wonderful. So on that note, talk, collaborate, change management, process, invest. And we are approaching the tipping point. So I'm keeping a leaderboard here. We're not there yet, but we have the tools, we have the technology, we have the desire, and we're coming out of a period of time where we're at the top of the game. The focus is here. Cargo is here to stay, and it's up to us. Yes?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Looking forward. Thank you, gentlemen. Very much appreciated. Just a quick round of applause to our 3 panelists. And Brandon, back to you.